Yeah, hello everyone who again who is here for the discussion on how to scale blockchain products to millions of users. And of course, we have the special guest Vince, who is joining us from the Netherlands. I'll give him the word to introduce himself in a bit, and also we have Emilian, who is coming from what is it, the old. What is it? The old Venice? No, the small Vienna, but the Bulgarian Vienna, which is Russe. And I'll also give him the word to introduce himself. Just a few words before we begin. I guess the discussion could be as long as we want it. I would suggest to, first go through a couple of questions that we have, and then you can ask anything that you feel is relevant. And I guess it could be around 40 minutes, 1 hour. And it will be obviously recorded, and then it will be uploaded to YouTube. But that's not going to happen immediately. It may be in about a week and a half or two. And then our primary Sofia Crypto Meetup event will be dedicated to basically using derivatives to hedge your positions. And what is the best way to do it? How can you do that in the most cost-efficient way? And I guess this topic is super relevant, having in mind what's happening currently on the crypto markets. I'm not sure if you're aware of all the drama that is currently unfolding related to UST, which is kind of depegging and bringing the entire crypto space with it. Apart from that, that event is going to be on the 25th, and we will have Miroslav Zaporozhano from InvestPro, who will be the primary speaker, and he has a lot of experience trading derivatives, especially, I believe, options. On the 25th, same place. And then we also might have another exclusive event this month, which will be dedicated to a book that recently went into print or was published, called Bitcoin is Venice. The author of the book will be here, and we'll be discussing different chapters. And if you haven't looked at the book, it's quite philosophical, it's a slow read, I must say. It's discussing basically the role of Bitcoin as a new type of asset which could potentially change the world. Maybe it's already changing the world, but in all different ways, like in very, very different ways, and innovative ways. So that event should be on the 30th of this month. But it will be announced, I guess, either tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. And of course, the author of the book is no Bulgarian. It's Alan Farrington is his name. He's quite popular on Twitter. He's one of the people that I'm personally following. And it's very interesting that in the beginning of the book, there is a quote which is in Bulgarian. It's a very weird quote. I shared it a couple of days ago in Sofia Crypto Meetup. It should be very interesting event, unique, having in mind that this person is not very frequently in Sofia. So that's why we're organizing a second exclusive event this month, which hasn't happened ever. So with all of these announcements, now it's time to jump into the discussion. And I will allow Vince, as the guest of honor, to introduce himself in the best possible way.
All right, thank you. Yes. Yes. All right, so a bit of backstory about my life. I started out as a software developer myself. In the very early days, I was a game developer. So I started with mobile games and those kind of things. Then I gradually transitioned towards the travel industry, like making booking systems, search engines for airlines, hotels, and so on. From there on, I actually also tried to set up my own airline with private jets. This one drastically went bankrupt, unfortunately, but it was a good adventure, and it was like a childhood dream. I had a nightclub, all kinds of crazy stories. Around 2013, I got approached by 3 guys who started one of the first Bitcoin brokers in the Netherlands called BTC Direct. And around that time, I actually got involved with Bitcoin for the first time, and that's actually how my whole journey in this space started. And I started looking at it mostly from a technical perspective. I was not that much interested in the financial side so far. I was just really triggered by this new peer-to-peer money, and coming from the Napster generation. Like, I was thinking, like, okay, this is a revolution. I want to be part of this. And then later on, I also set up, together with the local government in the Netherlands, accelerators and incubator programs on several campuses around the topics of blockchain, AI, and so on. And actually what we saw in the whole blockchain or crypto space was that for most people, it was still way too technical in the beginning. Like all the cliches with seeing a Bitcoin address for the first time, for most people, this was all abracadabra. So then we decided we wanted to make like a super consumer-friendly brand that fully abstracted everything. So don't bother people with all the technicalities of the whole crypto space, but abstract everything, make it super simple, full custodian, and so on. And that's a project called Blox. And that's now the #1 app in the Netherlands and Belgium, and active in 8 other countries. So in the UK, in Spain, in France, in Swiss, Austria, and so on. And that actually grew way out of hand, because we had the whole goal that we wanted to make an app just as simple as how people would be able to order a pizza. If they could order a pizza within 1 minute, we wanted them to be able to do the full KYC within 1 minute, deposit your euros, get your first Bitcoin, be able to cash it out, and have the money actually back in your bank account within 1 minute. So we had like this whole rush of pushing this technology to make this all possible. And that kind of blew up, and now it's something I'm very proud of, and it's actually very well known in the Netherlands and in Belgium. Now has national TV campaigns, is sponsoring the major football clubs and all kinds of other cool stuff. At one point I sold that venture, or at least my stake in it, and then I started doing tokenized real estate in the US. So converting apartment complexes, and then tokenizing them and selling them mostly to Asian investors. And currently I'm focusing again on a new kind of exchange, focus on sustainability, circularity, and climate change solutions, so to say. So that's like high level my life story and my bio. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Emilian Nenef and I'm from Recheck. Actually, I'm very, very delighted to have Vince here today. Actually, I met Vince maybe 5 years ago during this accelerator or incubator program, for which you were like a superstar back then, pulling the strings and organizing everything. I'm running a blockchain company. It's not in Sofia, it's in Russia, and one of the exceptions perhaps. We've been developing blockchain solutions since 2016, so we're one of the pioneers in the region at least. Really focused on the practical stuff, developing solutions that are bringing real value and focusing on real world use cases. We participated in one of these programs that Vince mentioned in Netherlands, in the south part. That's how I met Vince. Then we established a Dutch company, and we are quite active on the Dutch market, but also in Germany, in Western Europe generally. What else? We are now very much focused on developing solutions in the field of traceability, self-sovereign identity, data integrity, data authenticity on blockchain. And tomorrow there is a big event which we are also co-organizing. It's at the French Institute in Sofia, and it is the first event that is about applying blockchain in the public sector in Bulgaria. Not in Bulgaria generally, but the first event in Bulgaria about applying blockchain in the public sector. Minister of Electronic Governance is participating. Vlad is participating in a discussion panel, Vince as well. But there are no tickets available anymore. But there'll be live streaming about this event. And yeah, that's for me.
Okay, great. So then we can jump into the discussion, and I would like to open it up with the first question on when we're talking about scaling a blockchain product. I guess the first thing we need to do is to define what a blockchain product is exactly, because there are products that are based entirely on smart contracts called dApps. There are also semi-centralized applications in DeFi. There are also completely centralized applications like, for example, centralized exchanges. So when we are talking about scaling products, what are we talking about here? Or are we talking about all of these three things?
Yeah, so in our case with Blox, for example, it's a very centralized exchange. So it's not a typical blockchain project per se. But we interface with a lot of blockchains, of course, to manage the cold storage and to validate transactions and so on. So in that sense, we had to do a lot of hard lessons about which projects works and which don't, and that went with a lot of hurdles and a lot of expectations about what you read on a project and what it actually delivers. And so you had to come up and compensate a lot of things yourself in most cases to have a reliable service towards your customers. So that's with Blox. With the real estate company, that's called Real Assets, and the Real Assets community economy in the US. That was mostly blockchain focused itself. In the beginning, it's focused on Ethereum, but the goal was, of course, to create the own blockchain. And yeah, that's it. And now with the new exchange, it's also again going to be a centralized exchange, unfortunately. Yeah.
All right, cool. Emil, do you want to? No. Okay. Cool. Then, so when we're talking about blockchain products, we'll be talking about more or less centralized products, which in a way integrate with blockchains. So then when we're talking about scaling those products, is the first thing is, before scaling, is how do you find the product market fit? Like, how do you reach that level where you say, okay, so I guess this product is working, people like it, but then how do I bring it to millions of users? So how do you find the product market fit for a blockchain-based product?
All right. Yeah, there's two sides to that story, in my opinion. So you have the idealistic people, the hippies, and the people that want to change the world. And I hope there's some of them here. Yeah? All right. Very good. And you, of course, have the people that want to get rich quick. So that's a totally different audience. So I think for the first group, they're mostly interested, of course, in quality content. So in our case, what we actually started analyzing is, instead of just promoting projects directly, we started looking like, okay, what are these projects changing in society? So an analysis we did was basically making a comparison, like very high level, like, okay, what are the base structures in society? And we make a metaphor with games. So what are the games of life? So we have the game of money, we have the game of identity, we have the game of all kinds of topics, and all these games, they have certain rules within certain regions and so on. And our whole storyline with Blox was basically for the hippies and the game changers to tell the narratives of how these games are not fixed by structures created by people decades before us, but they're up for change for people like us that come up with a good idea that can make it better. And if you then, of course, attract like people from all around the world behind this idea, you can all of a sudden come up with structures that supersede countries and become global alternatives to things that in the past you were born into, and now you can start choosing for alternatives for all these aspects or these games of life, so to say. So with that, we're way more focused on the educational side, on getting people enthusiastic about these narratives, so to say. So if you look at the content of us in the beginning, it was like all these mini episodes, like mini storylines, like that basically take you on this whole journey of starting to see, like, okay, why did the internet start? What happened with Napster? What happened with Wikipedia? We really started making like a mini documentaries about all these changes in the crowd taking over things that in the past centralized parties were doing. So and then of course we started doing a lot of meetups. So I'm a big fan of initiatives like this, because the grassroots things is always what creates a movement. So I think you should stop sell a product and always focus on creating a movement of people that really almost see it as a religious thing to be involved in a project and be an ambassador for it, and be an example of that new lifestyle and the new rules and of the games of life, so to say. So that's one aspect. The other side is, of course, the people that are very triggered by financial gain. So that was, for me, to be realistic, something that was a bit of a shock, because I came into it very idealistic, but the majority of our customers in the end were all about getting rich quick, so to say. So I jokingly said at a later stage that we're not running so much a blockchain innovation company, but we're more running a casino, basically. So it was a bit of a criticism. So for these people, in most cases, it's all about, of course, the cliches of technical analysis and creating good video content around these topics, pushing, of course, with notifications, daily triggers to them around these topics. And in most cases, what we found really successful was all these niche WhatsApp groups. So all these friend groups having like 200 people in a WhatsApp group, and there's like thousands of them in each country, and just getting like one ambassador in each of those groups to be like the first person to lead people to your things. So that was like a massive viral effect for us. Then we also took over, it's not original, but this cliche of what Uber did. Like if you invite a friend, you both get some credit and you can start trading. So in most cases, people could get like 10 euros or 20 euros to just get started without needing to deposit themselves first. There was, of course, a catch that if you wanted to cash it out, you had to do the KYC and you also had to deposit something. So it wouldn't be a full bleeder on our end, so to say. But that really took off, and people send it to others and so on. And then also I have to be very realistic about timing and momentum in the market. So it's always, from an ego perspective, you can say that you can plan these things and that it's your own success and so on. But the reality is often that some good news and some good FUD or whatever is always the main trigger for a lot of activity. So we had a lot of moments where the volatility was relatively flat, and then maybe for 2 months in the year we made like more revenue than the 10 other months, for example. So and it was very difficult to count on predictable activity in that sense, or to structure it in a way. So in a lot of cases you still have to count a lot on luck and the market cycles and so on, realistically.
Just one comment regarding product market fit. Based on our experience developing practical blockchain solutions, so for me it doesn't make a big difference if it is a blockchain solution, blockchain product or not. The same principles apply, the same mechanics, the same rules of law. So you need to create a value, and I really like this notion of practical idealist, I think. So we had this vision, this expectation that since we are developing a blockchain product, then it's something that should be liked, something that should be adopted, something that should go smoothly. It's not really the case. So it's really about all basic things around marketing, around user experience, around community building, around business model, of course. And my advice to companies developing blockchain solution is don't push it necessarily as something that is changing the world as a super blockchain product. Be really pragmatic and apply the same principles. And of course, focus on the people that are from the blockchain world, blockchain communities. But now there is so much spam and so much sponsored content, and it's so difficult that you need to be really creative in the way you're positioning your product on the market.
Yeah, absolutely. I was recently looking at the cost of adding some ads on CoinGecko, and I believe there in the search bar, if you want to add your logo, it costs about $300,000 per week, and the rest of the other ads are more or less the same price. So with that in mind, what do you do with funding? Like, how do you, how did you manage to fund this whole initiative? And then when it comes to marketing, how much funding did you dedicate to that? And I guess it's we have to have in mind that this is happening a few years ago. Yeah. So it's not in the current market with the $300,000 per week ads, but still, yeah. How did you fund the whole endeavor?
Yeah, so to summarize again how it started just with a brokerage front end for Bittrex and two other exchanges back then. So that generated, of course, already some proper cash flow. And then by the time we started developing Blox, we actually, of course, we were in the very early days of Binance popping up. So we were really triggered by the potential of what Binance was doing. And I think we very early on already saw like, okay, this is going to be the number one, the most dominant player in the whole market. And we wanted to compete with that, so that was our goal. It's a bit ridiculous to compete with it because it's a huge organization with, I don't know, 6,000 or 8,000 people by now. But the main thing for us was like we saw with a lot of our processes in our organization that instead of fixing it with software, we were just adding 2-3 more employees to do the same task and so on. So we were not scaling in an efficient way. So we really stepped back and started making like a full blueprint. Like, okay, if we would do all the processes in a way that people could do them themselves instead of us needing to have like the overhead of for example, people doing the KYC or whitelisting accounts or approving transactions or managing the balances on the exchanges or moving funds from the cold storage to hot, all these things. We really started making like all these requirements, and we made like in our opinion, the most absurd system that we could think of in that moment for a Dutch entity and a Dutch startup. And so in our case, in the end, it turned out to be like about 1.5 to 2 years of development with around 30 developers in parallel. And I think from a total development budget, it was around between 3.5 to 4 million euros just to develop the software and the product. So in our case, that's basically a huge hybrid exchange that is connected to a lot of exchanges, and then we have like a constant super order book. So we constantly pull in all the order books, sort them so that we have like a mega order book across all the exchanges. So we know, okay, we can buy this piece there, that piece there, that piece there, the cheapest, or we can sell it there the highest. Then we have a whole balancing mechanism because we can constantly see arbitrage opportunities, of course, between all the different exchanges. And then we have a whole optimization layer that every time a customer does a trade, we have like a small waiting time to see if we can do a counter trade with another user before we actually settle something on the exchange and so on. And then you have like the whole vault. So you have like the hot storage, you have the tappet storage, which is like between hot and cold, and the cold storage. So the cold storage is like a hardware secure module in a data center. You really have to go there and get like a signed transaction. You only do that like once a week, for example. Then you have the tappet you do with 3-4 people. You have to sign off on it, and hot the software can interact with directly. And then on top of that, you have like the user-facing app, and that app had to be, of course, multilingual. It had to support all the major fiat currencies, payment methods, all this stuff. It had to support all these identity documents. So we had to look for, we had to go through proper KYC providers to get all these things really smooth, and get to a point where if you would sit in front of the camera. So not that you had to wait like 2-3 hours, but really like we wanted to do everything live. So you had like the live webcam that got matched with the document got verified, all these things. Then as soon as you do a deposit, the deposit account has to be on the name of the person that is KYC'd, so you cannot use other people's accounts, for example. And then you have the whole thing with Comply Advantage and other things where you have politically exposed persons and you start tracking like the behavior of people and so on. So this creates like this whole bubble of things that you need to do, so to say. And then you have the within the app, for people you have like the simple mechanism of instantly depositing euros, so it's instantly in your account. So in most cases, there's of course a delay on our end before we actually get money from the PSP. So we need to pre-finance all these things. So there's a lot of money management involved and constantly managing all these buffers and making sure you don't run out and that you have liquidity on the right spots constantly to execute properly. So all these mechanisms together, it was like 1.5 to 2 years of work to get all these things done with a very large group. And then actually the whole campaigning started. And I think like only after 1.5 years that actually started taking off properly. And the biggest push there in our case was TV advertising. So just national TV in front of the news, all these cliches. And actually getting the timing just right, where the whole market sentiment was actually good. And we were actually the first party in the Netherlands pushing on TV. So we had like this first mover advantage that really took the market by storm, so to say. And then the other thing, and this had to do a bit, in my opinion, with the gambling mindset of most people speculating on crypto, was that looking at the audiences, we saw a better match with the sporting audiences, like the football fans and so on, than maybe with a generic audience, because they might be used to sports betting or other things. So that was maybe the line of thinking, so to say. And the budget for the advertising is way bigger than the development. So all in all, to do something like that and to get to 1 million plus customers and so on, it's a very intense exercise. So in our case now there's like more than 100 people working at the project, massive amounts of transactions going over it. On good days, you earn back almost the investment, so to say, and then you have months where there's barely any activity, and that's something that's really tricky. And
Okay, so you mentioned that you've dedicated more funds to marketing than development, and development itself was quite expensive.
Yes.
Okay, so did you?
This was in the Netherlands for the record.
Yes, this was in the Netherlands.
Outsourced.
Yes. Did you get any VC money, or like how did you fund it?
No, in the case of Blox, it was purely the money that was already made with BTC Direct before. Yeah.
All right. So you also mentioned that the market sentiment is important. Yes. So if you assume that currently we're in a bear market, would you suggest or advise someone who just has an idea now, like, is this the time to actually go ahead with its launch, or is it better to kind of work on it more, develop the MVP further, and then when times are better to launch it? But also have in mind that when times are better, I guess ads cost is even higher. So yeah.
Yeah, like in the end, like the market momentum is always a booster or an accelerator of you doing something good in the first place. So it can never compensate for you not having a good product. So in that sense, I don't think, or let me say different. If your product is shit, you can still wait for the right timing in the market and you still won't sell it, so to say. So that's not the solution. Like I just said, the competition is also, of course, way higher to get the attention if it's in a bull scenario. So I don't think you have to wait for it. It's just more in my sense that you need to have like how do you call it, the runway, so to say, to sit it out. So I think that's the most important thing, and really like not have a horizon of 6 months and then you need to close up shop, but really be in it for like 2-3 years, that you can really sit it out and get that uptake going. And sometimes you're lucky and sometimes you're not. And if you're lucky, it will be in month 3, and if you're not lucky, it will be in year 2. But that's the game. So yeah.
Okay, so then when it comes to the MVP, how do you define it? Like for you, what was the minimum viable product that you said, like, okay, so this is the thing that we need to create, and this is what's going to work for the users? Like how did you get to the MVP?
Yeah, so within the software development world, you always have 2 approaches. So I was also a developer, and if I would go my own way, I would go on these infinite quests of creating all kinds of features that a user would never see, but they would make everything very optimal. And that's like how do you call it? Like a trap, so to say. So you gotta have the discipline always to really put the user value first, and even if it's just a stupid button that appears and that you can click, it's more valuable than some optimization on the background, because it's real business value of someone seeing an improvement on your product. So in our case, we had like the 2-week sprint model always. So we forced everything to have actual user value. In the beginning, we made a big mistake by doing the development of the 3 separate aspects separate. So in the beginning, we started with having a separate team on the Vault, a separate team on the trading engine, and a separate team on the user app, so to say. And that basically created a lot of mismatch with how do you call it? The full cycle from front to back. Because then here the API was not working or buggy or not finished, and then this button was not there even though the API endpoint was there. So that was very, very tricky, and I think we definitely wasted money there. So I would not recommend that. And then we started doing it, what I then call vertically, really having like a team focus on developing a feature from front to back. And that was way more productive. And then we put the user value first, and all our own dashboards and other things as minimum as possible, because in the beginning we had still like enough people to pick up the slack, so to say, manually. And then gradually, once the product for the consumer was pretty much in place. So in our case, we didn't open up all the coins that were there on the exchanges. We just listed like the first 3, of course, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, just for people to have like the simple user experience in the beginning. And the same was, for example, with payment methods. Of course, you can integrate any kind of payment method and so on, or any cash out method. But in the beginning, we focused first on the Netherlands. And we gradually started adding things, because it's very tricky always in software projects. If you have a lot of these open tickets constantly, like it becomes like this never-ending story, and that's like a huge pitfall, I think, always in project development. Yeah.
Vince, I wanted to ask you something about fundraising. So now I have some observations that I've been speaking with some investors, and they would like to invest in blockchain startups. But usually blockchain startups are not so willing to get this equity investment, and they prefer to raise through token. So what would be your advice in that sense? So imagine I'm a small startup, I'm starting now, and I have a company in Netherlands or in Bulgaria, wherever, and I have to decide. I can go to equity investment, or I can do a token sale and develop a token economics, or maybe some hybrid solution. So what is your advice on this?
Yeah, I think the whole token approach, of course, becomes more lightweight and lightweight, but the problem is you still don't have a user base or a group of believers in your project. So I think in that sense, the VC approach is always a good validator, not only for yourself, if you're able to explain it to a traditional person, that it still makes sense. So it's a good discipline thing, I think. And And the other aspect is, if you would do a token sale, of course, for the relative, how do you say it, green retail investor in tokens, seeing a VC that has validated the project and participates in it is, of course, one of the biggest value indicators you can have, because the average retail token investor is not that good in doing due diligence on an investment, with all due respect. So they like to follow someone that is more knowledgeable and so on. And I think in general, it's always good, of course, to have your own skin in the game, but it's better to have the most critical person you encounter on board, because then you jump through most of the hoops to explain yourself and to validate it properly. And I think just going for the token route, in most cases, it's these cliche. I don't want to say egotistical founders, but they don't like the counter arguments, and they don't want to have any criticism, and then they go just in their own route, in their own thing. And that's okay if you have a large audience, but if you don't, in most cases it will fall flat, I think. Yeah. Or you're lucky and some random hype starts, but in the end you never developed yourself as an entrepreneur by getting proper guidance and sparring partners. So I think it's very mature to do it the opposite way. No.
Okay, so your advice is to kind of validate the idea first with a VC, potentially develop an audience of users, and then potentially at some point launch a token, if it makes sense. So generally speaking, does a token, do you think, does it help scaling, or does it prevent it, or it depends on when you introduce it? Because people think that, for example, we are launching a token, lots of people are participating in our token sale. We have like 1,000 people, let's say, who are buying our tokens, or 1,000 addresses that have the token. So this, in a way, is like potentially some kind of scaling in the beginning, and people believe that this could be useful because people, if you have the token, you kind of following what's happening, potentially following what's happening with the project, and then also potentially also telling other people about this project. So do you think this works as a like a shortcut to scaling?
Yeah. One other argument that pops to mind is, of course, if you do the token approach with all these small retail investors, you, of course, get like 10, 15,000 opinions that constantly start nagging you in your chat and that you need to respond to. And I think also in the beginning of a lot of projects, it's good to really have focus and to not be too distracted with the noobs needing all the basic information constantly from you. So therefore, it's good to work with seasoned people and to really for 6 or 9 months fully focus on launching the MVP. In regards to the shortcuts and stuff, I think one of the most underestimated aspects in most cases is that in most cases the focus is always on the primary market, and I'm always most triggered by the revenue streams from the secondary market. So if a token model is more focused on that, then and it creates the activity in the secondary market and the cash flow from that, then you have a way more sustainable thing than then I think these things that just raise a lot and then they have like a gap of 2 years before they actually deliver something that generates cash flow. It's
All right. So I had my potentially final question is when it comes to tools that you have used, like for example, to get the information from the blockchain. Like for example, currently that's Infura in the case of Ethereum. Or when it comes to operations, like for example, Google Docs, or when it comes to like CRM or marketing tools, like what are the tools that you're using or you used that kind of helped you scale?
You of course have operational tools. So in our case, we are really fan of Notion. I don't know if anybody uses Notion. Yeah. and then you have a platform called Deel, D-E-E-L. You can hire like contractors and employees in countries all over the world, and it has like a standardized way to do it. Ticketing, we used Jira, so it's pretty standard. From a whole infrastructure perspective, in the beginning, we did a lot of the things where we would run the nodes ourselves and get the whole hassle of all these custom situations. And later we started leveraging, of course, solutions of third parties, because you always get like these edge cases where, yeah, you lose a lot of time on anyway, you get the picture. Then from an infrastructure perspective, with Blox, we started from the start with the whole microservice approach. So the microservices on Kubernetes, I don't know if you guys know it, yeah. So that was really, really cool, because then, you just, almost everything you do is code-based, how it scales. And you keep dividing every piece of functionality into a small microservice or mini API that runs independently, so to say. And that allowed us to rapidly not have like one giant clunk of a system, but really see like, okay, for example, with the order books coming in constantly and syncing all these order books, you had like massive amounts of data. So that was the main bottleneck in the application. So because of this microservices, we could really keep optimizing just this part of the application without affecting anything else. So that was really, really a good approach. In regards to a payment service provider, we worked with Adyen, from KYC with a company called MyTech, for the compliance, so the politically exposed persons and so on, Comply Advantage, which is a really good tool. Chain analysis. What other aspects do we have?
Marketing, maybe CRM or something.
Yeah, CRM. In our case, we did a lot of tracking, but that also has changed recently. Like you cannot have the tracking cookies as it used to, so I cannot advise on that route as efficiently anymore. But in the past, you could do a lot with these tracking cookies, retargeting, and so on. But that game is a bit more complicated nowadays. Yeah.
So actually, two final questions. So the first one is related to regulations, because I think that regulations are one of the top topics of 2020 in the blockchain space. So I cannot imagine what was the situation back when you were like starting to develop that. So were you not worried that whatever you're doing with the blockchain or these financial services could lead to some problems with the authorities? So how did you address that? That's the first question.
Yeah, so the main thing is always innovation is always way ahead of regulation. So it's never the other way around. So in that sense, you always have to step on the toes and apologize later. It sounds a bit stupid, but in most cases, because you're innovating, regulators will also see that you're actually trying and you're just trying to find a route to make it optimal. And in most cases, they're also very realistic about the aspect that you're starting out. So this has to do with this concept of the industry life cycle. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that concept. But basically, when you start out, like say, for example, you have the car industry. When it started, everybody was making their own car in the garage. So you had 10,000 different cars being made everywhere. And then someone figures something out that works really well and standardizes something. And then they take like the whole market. And all of a sudden, cars start driving around and you start having accidents for the first time. And then regulators need to step in. So all of a sudden, a threshold for new players is that they need to play by the rules based on the problems that the first players created, so to say. And then this keeps maturing. The other thing that of course was in the beginning, like when we started out, there was not that much screening on the source of money, for example. And then gradually the requirements for us to start screening where money comes from. So it's very nice that you create an account, but if you all of a sudden want to deposit 10,000 euros or 100,000 euros, we need to know like where does this money come from, of course. And and we need to see that it's consistent with your behavior. So that's what Comply Advantage, for example, does. It tracks like, okay, what is your behavior, what is the behavior of your peers, and are you doing something exceptional or whatever, and otherwise you get flagged. Then there's this thing called the burden of proof. So anytime something goes wrong, the burden of proof of that we did everything correctly is on us as the intermediary. So we need to prove that we actually checked their identity, that we checked these funds, so we need to do all this record keeping of doing all these things. Then another thing that happened is at one point the banks started becoming difficult. So in the Netherlands, they started closing off all the bank's accounts of crypto companies, for example. I don't know if you guys had that here. Probably as well. Yeah, so that of course created a problem, because all of a sudden, like, your whole operation starts being jeopardized. So then you start doing contingency planning, having multiple accounts, splitting these things, and so on. But there's of course a loophole in the Netherlands where it's called zorgplicht. So basically they have an obligation to service you or something like that. Anyway, so we had to do a legal procedure to force them and so on. And then you have the whole aspect of consumer protection, of course. And this has mostly to do whether you're facilitating the primary markets or the secondary markets. So if you facilitate the primary markets, like the first issuance of tokens, then there's a lot of rules that you need to play by, and a lot of consumer protection is in place. If you're just in the secondary market and just like an exchange, then you're not in the business of promoting a project for the first time or whatever, but you're just like an exchange at the border. So it's way, way simpler to play that game, so to say. Yeah?
One question. So imagine now you're running a startup in Netherlands. So you're aware with the regulations and the rules, and it's a classical SaaS service. And you decide to take some crypto payments, to accept crypto payments. And is there an actual requirement to do KYC when you're receiving crypto payments, or is there a threshold that you need to observe? First question. And my next one is, are you on the safe side if you're paying the taxes in Netherlands when you're selling the tokens? Can you feel safe in terms of how you'll be treated by the regulators?
So in regards to the first question, the whole KYC thing is, again, it has to do with the burden of proof. So it's up to us that if something goes wrong, we need to prove that we know who that person was. So yes, we can ignore it, but as soon as it goes wrong, we are responsible. So you will shoot yourself in the foot in the long term. Then the other thing is that there's still like a lot of differences in each country. So you have to really restrict what people can do. So in some countries, currencies are okay, but if it becomes a security, it of course has different rules. So you have to do it on a per country basis. In our case, we set like a limit for 250 euros without KYC, so people could do it. Without KYC, they could up to 250 euros get Bitcoin and so on. The only thing we did on the cash out side was that we did require it, so to say. So you can buy it, but if you need to cash it out, there's of course the stop again. And the other thing that we had issues with was the age limits. So for example, if a 14-year-old installs the app, of course you also need to limit them and restrict them. So in a way you still need to do some kind of verification to check these kind of things. Yeah. Does that answer your question a bit? Okay.
Okay, so final question on my side related to marketing. Yeah. So how large was the marketing team, and if you remember, like what were the campaigns that were most efficient, what worked, what didn't work? Yeah, like when it comes to marketing, what was the budget? Not like in numbers, but as a percentage of the whole thing, like say per month, per year, whatever you decide.
Yeah, so first in regards to the marketing team, so we had a lot of experience with BTC Direct, so the traditional crypto broker, which was non-custodian. So by the time we started with Blox, there were actually like around 300,000 existing customers from BTC Direct. So to be really fair, that was like the main kickstart, traditional email campaigns, all the old school shit. So that was not super sexy or whatever. But the content writing, so writing articles, technical analysis videos, these kind of things, it's quite a hassle to build it up. So it might take you like 3/4 of a year or a year to actually get to a proper audience and a proper routine with weekly doing these things. But once you get there, this becomes your main, your main driver and your main loyalty binding piece of marketing, so to say. And then, later, of course, like I said, the thing with the WhatsApp groups, that was really popular. So even I myself, I'm in 20, 30 of these app groups, and most people are. Then the invite a friend with a credit, that always works because people like free stuff. The other thing, the association with soccer, football was also very, very good. So doing TV advertising or sponsoring those teams and these things. So the whole marketing team, it depends on who you fully include. But let's say in our case, there were about 12 to 14 people involved with that. So, and those are people from branding, content creation, campaign management to copywriting, all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
That sounds like a pretty well. Yeah. Cool. All right. So I guess I don't have any more questions. So it's time for you guys, if you have anything to ask Vince in terms of like something that we missed. Now is the time. Yeah.
So in your experience, I would presume that you have seen a lot of blockchain products, not only the ones you have worked on, but also other products. Do you have one or two examples that really impressed you? Like you saw big potential in them, and you can tell us why.
From a technical perspective.
Yeah. So.
Financial. Okay. Yeah.
Overall.
Yeah. So the question is if there are any products in the blockchain space that impressed Vince. Yeah. So.
One thing comes to mind at this moment, and it's ICP, so the Internet Computer. I don't know if you guys know that project. Yeah. You want to freestyle a bit about it? Okay. Yeah.
I don't know much about it, but I just know the project. It's lots of people like it.
Yes, I think that's going to be quite a game changer. And
it's a layer one.
Yes, and I don't know how to explain it in like 2 minutes, but basically they created also like a proper infrastructure to serve web content and all kinds of other things in a very, very simple way. So it becomes very easy to build things like Facebook or YouTube or whatever, fully decentralized. So also the whole serving of the interface, the content serving, the backend logic, everything fully decentralized. So you create like fully unstoppable alternatives to the current tech giants. So that's what I really like, and that's different in my opinion than a lot of websites that maybe have some blockchain in the backend somewhere, where the server communicates with it. This is fully, fully blockchain based, so to say, in the most simplified way. Yeah. All right.
Any other?
The hippie in me, or the idealist. But this project is also struggling. But I like it from the way they approach it. It's a hollow chain. Because they have this agent-centric approach instead of a universal ledger, they have like a ledger per agent or per node. It's a bit like what's it called? Hydera or yeah, a similar logic to that. But then, yeah. Anyway, that's something I also like, but I don't know if it has enough critical momentum to actually go anywhere. But yeah, but I like it from an idealism perspective. Yeah.
How about DeFi? Something from DeFi or in general DeFi?
Yes, yeah, of course. I think that's massive. I think in regards to DeFi, yeah, specific projects or yeah.
Maybe in general, like what do you think?
Yeah, in general, I think we're really at a tipping point where the crowd is going to take over all the institutional stuff, hopefully. So in that sense, I cannot wait. Like I'm now really focused on real estate, for example, to not have any bank involved anymore in any real estate transaction. I think that's like my dream scenario. So and to do that with the crowd, with a syndicate of people from 120 countries, all chipping in and all, yeah, how do you say it? All working together. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that's the real revolution. And because I think in the end we need to be realistic about, you have this whole world of digital assets that are very speculative and so on, but the real world assets like real estate or land or these other things, those are like the stable multi-generational wealth building opportunities that the people really need to get access to, and that are way more predictable for future happiness than the so many monkey or robot or whatever. Yeah. All right. La 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 la. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and those are illiquid in a way, and you can like by tokenizing them.
Yeah, maybe I can explain. Yeah. So, for example, what I'm currently developing is instead of a real estate owner owning a building, every piece of material will become a separate entity, a separate asset. So every brick, every piece of steel, every wood, piece of wood, glass, roof tile, and so on. And instead of materials being sold to the developer and the real estate owner owning the materials, they basically lease the materials. And as long as the materials are in the building, the real estate owner needs to pay a lease to the platform for the actual use of the brick as long as the building is standing. And the people that own the tokens of these bricks, they get the cash flow from this lease, for example. And thereby the trading commissions that we get from all the trades on these tokens, we will start using to build up small savings accounts to pay for the circular disassembly. Like in the future, if the building needs to be deconstructed, we want to take it apart just like Lego and reuse the materials again in a new building, so that every time we make a new building, we use the waste materials from the old building into the new building. And materials will keep their value and become more and more valuable over time and have like an infinite life cycle, so to say. And because we reuse these materials, we don't introduce new materials, we don't have to mine new materials, we don't put them in landfills. We, of course, make a CO2 impact, we make energy savings on transportation and so on. And thereby, investing in that brick becomes like a green investment that saves the environment, generates cash flow, and is actually backed by something tangible in the real world. And I think in regards to UST and all these other things, what you see in most markets is that all the trading pairs, the most volume is always in relation to some kind of stablecoin or something as a reference point for real value in the real world. And if in the near future you have the choice between a fiat-based stablecoin or a brick-based stablecoin that generates cash flow and that is doing something good for the environment, but that is just as liquid, then I think that will become the game changer that's going to steal the whole market of the Tether coins and these kind of things. Yeah.
Is this what you just explained, just a concept or something that you're building?
That's what I'm now developing. Yes. Yeah.
What's the project called?
It's called Materials. Materials.com. and the My Economy, M-A-E, economy.org. It's not live yet, but you have the first primeur. Yeah, yeah. But this, yeah, some cash in the back. No, but in the end, like what I would like to see with those kind of initiatives, and you can apply it to different things. You also have a thing called the Plastic Bank. I don't know if you guys know that, social plastic. Where basically every time a manufacturer of bottles, like shampoo bottles or drink bottles, puts material into circulation, they need to pay like a small fee to the blockchain of the plastic bank. And if you're in some area, like on a beach, and you pick up a plastic bottle, you can actually claim that value from the plastic bank. So thereby it creates the plastic economy where people can make a living and they can buy like school equipment or food by picking up plastic on the beach in polluted countries. So, and that's I think like the real innovations that need to start happening, where we start tackling real issues of humanity instead of the next Ape Yacht Club kind of things. But yeah, all right.
Sorry, what? So this reminds me of something, Vince, and something that I heard from you maybe 5 years ago. So you had this concept or vision about blockchain being a kind of a nervous system of the contemporary society. So this really touched me a lot back then. And I can say that you're one of the blockchain advocates and influential guys during this period. But can you elaborate a bit about this concept about blockchain being a nervous system? Is it a challenge?
Which part? Because it's a 45.
That's no. Like a philosophical part, like explaining how this could be like a tissue that can give a reason to connect with each other and to do this with more meaning and.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think what you're referencing to. So this like many years ago, I did a podcast where I made like this comparison between us as humans and the cells in a human body is one scale, and if you look at the Earth, like us individual humans, it's also like a mega organism together, for example, and yeah. Let me see what I can focus on with this story because it's too big. Yeah, sorry. I think one of the main things that I really liked in that podcast was actually that I think something like a blockchain will allow us to do gigantic tasks in very small consecutive chunks. So we can do like huge projects. Like in the past, for example, we made things like pyramids. But where are the pyramids of today? Where are these long-term projects where thousands and thousands of people in a way contribute maybe beyond their lifetime to something, and you have like this surviving mechanism that keeps producing value and becomes more and more smart and intelligent and so on.
There was this aspect that with internet we have the basic infrastructure, like the muscles and the bones, and that one exactly. And so we have the infrastructure to connect, and with blockchain we have the reason to connect.
Yes, exactly. So now I know what you're talking about. All right. Yeah, so the comparison I made was that the whole TCP, IP, HTTP infrastructure is just getting something from A to B and having locations to go to, basically, with the internet. So it's similar like the blood vessels in the body. But there's no intelligence really, besides the intelligence at the destination. And the comparison I made back then was, of course, that with the blockchain, because you have a whole history of everything that moved from A to B, you all of a sudden start having the whole context of why something is moving in a certain direction or comes from a place. And there's, of course, with traceability and other things, that the transparency becomes such a game-changing thing, where one example is now we base prices for products always on the supplying side, for example. What did it cost to produce it, and what did it blah, 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 blah. What margin do we need to make? But I think in the future it will totally tip around, and everybody will have individual prices for every product based on their own data footprint and behavior and so on. And for example, in regards to climate, with carbon credits and these things, The more you pollute, the more expensive your products will become that pollute. And if you don't do anything, it might be cheap to fly, but if you fly 3 times a week, it will become almost impossible to fly, for example. So I think we will start seeing these balancing mechanisms on human behavior, starting to dictate commerce and starting to push for better behavior for society as a whole, instead of individualistic personal gain, which we're now a bit far in. Yeah.
Is this an utopia, or do you see this happening really? And in what horizon?
Yeah. Every night when I close my eyes. No, like, of course, utopia it's impossible, but I think you should always strive for something to do it better. And if together, collectively, we can do things that we believe in, and even if we just achieve like 10-15%, it will still be a better world. And that's, I think, also like in regards to climate change and all these things, you can have 100 opinions about it, what's right, and if it's X degrees or 5 degrees or 2 degrees every year or whatever. But in the end, is it really that bad that we're switching to solar or wind or all these things? It's super, super good that we're making that effort to make the transition. The same with food, that we're more and more looking again at local food production, these eco-villages, these self-sustaining things. With 3D printing instead of getting products from IKEA or whatever. I think we're going to see such a shift again to hyper-local community awareness again, instead of this mega corporation, global consumer thinking. Yeah.
So just
Okay. That's all right. All right. Thank you.
Okay, cool. I'm not sure if there are any more questions, but I think, yeah, we are at 1 hour, so maybe it's a good time to stop here. If you have any questions, of course, we can you can ask them to Vince directly. So, yeah, thank you. I hope this was interesting, and I like the philosophical ending. This is exactly what we are going to talk about on the 30th for the second exclusive Sofia Crypto Meetup event this month. So see you there, see you possibly on the 25th as well for the main one. And yeah, thanks for coming. Bye-bye.